I'm Al Carnesdale, the Dean of the Kennedy School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Class Day at the John F. Kennedy School of Government. To you, the members of the Kennedy School class of 1993, let me be about the 110th, but not the last, to offer congratulations. And also to your families and friends who are here with you. I'm privileged to introduce your Class Day speaker. She's an important and influential American political leader, and we're proud to have her as a member of the Kennedy School family. Her stint here at the Institute of Politics this past spring gave us a chance to learn why the people of Illinois and of the nation as a whole have such confidence in her ability to lead and to inspire. It's a delight to welcome home a former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a former Secretary of Labor, the Honorable Lynn Martin. Let me say a few words. One of Lynn Martin's first forays into politics, we understand, was her run for the presidency of her 8th grade class. She ran against her boyfriend, we're told. She later explained, and I quote, "I lost by 1 vote. My vote. You see, I voted for my opponent because I thought it was polite. Well, he voted for himself. And I learned my lesson. If you believe in yourself, vote for yourself." Close quote. Well, I believe in Lynn Martin, and my suspicion is that that former boyfriend believes in her too. A Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Illinois, Lynn Martin taught high school, economics, government, and English, and raised 2 children. She ran for election in 1972 for the Winnebago County Board and won. She served subsequently in the Illinois House and then in the Illinois Senate. From 1981 to 1991, Lynn Martin represented the 16th District of Illinois in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was the first freshman to serve on the Budget Committee, and her election as vice chairman of the House Republican Conference made her the first woman ever to serve in the House Republican leadership. Lynn Martin is more than a path breaker. She's a highly respected, independent thinker. She's committed to speaking and voting in full accord with her convictions, and she gets things done. As Secretary of Labor from 1991 to early 93, Lynn Martin headed a federal agency with 18,000 employees and a budget of more than $42 billion. She focused on programs aimed at ensuring that the changing workforce would be better educated, better trained, better paid, and more secure. She continues to speak out about the full range of issues for which she has fought long and hard. Indeed, she reminds me forcefully and often of the need for a more diverse tenured faculty at the Kennedy School, and she's right. In today's world, of television talk shows, political leaders covet an appearance on the Larry King Live show. Lynn Martin has outdone them all. Earlier this week, she was Larry King on the Larry King Live show, hosting the program in his absence. What versatility. I'm honored to introduce to you your 1993 Class Day speaker, our friend and colleague, the Honorable Lynn Martin.
Thank you very, very much. It is indeed a pleasure, and how nice to say to come home. I'm not sure I would have phrased it quite that way, but now that I've heard it, I like it very much, Al, and it is good to be back here. When I was a great deal younger, I never knew why there were long introductions. I always wanted people to get right to the speaker so we could get it over with. Now that I'm the person being introduced, I just love them. After all, when was the last time you heard an introduction? May I introduce the barely adequate speaker for today? Kindness always makes people exaggerate one's virtues. But at this stage in my life, I don't believe a little exaggeration is that harmful. And so, Dean, I'm extraordinarily grateful for your kindness today. But it isn't my day after all. It is yours. It is for the graduates of the Kennedy School of Government. As a Republican, I'm allowed to say that not only will you have a degree, you will also soon have better cash flow. And that makes it an exciting time for you and for spouses and for parents or for anyone else who's been part of your educational experience. In fact, all over America the last few weeks there have been commencement speakers in high schools, grammar schools, colleges, universities, and probably 98% of them talked about beginnings, from the Latin word commencement, and how you're all going to start this new path. But that really doesn't fit here, because you've already experienced more than one beginning, and actually you came back to the Kennedy School for different reasons. You were looking for something else, for different answers, different methods, different systems, all in an effort to somehow merge public practice and private ambition. But you also know that we're facing a world that's not just evolving rapidly, but a world where a revolution, albeit sometimes subtle, is occurring within the United States, and that means ultimately the world. This is a revolution of the workplace, a revolution based on culture and change with dramatic implications. Lately, for instance, you and I know there's been a rush to condemn the 80s. Greed, gluttony, the 7 deadly sins are seemingly enlarged and exaggerated by every motion, every practice, every process that people have observed in that just soon, almost forgotten decade. At least that's what everyone says. But during this supposed period of rampant materialism, there was, if one looks, and you don't have to look actually that closely, some very positive areas. One of those areas was called jobs. And whether one was a liberal Democrat from Massachusetts or a conservative Republican from Texas, there was an enormous range of opportunities. Graduates at all levels found themselves being approached for jobs, and jobs at salaries that a few years before would have been fantasy. The argument was not where one was going to work, it was could one afford to make the enormous sacrifice to stay in public service when there was so much more money to be made in the towers of Mammon. We heard the glory of the sacrifice people were going to make by taking mere professorships instead of dominating the international trade market. And now that the 80s and materialism is out and the 90s are here, there seems to be one small problem. Those kinds of discussions are irrelevant as people seek career opportunities in a highly competitive world. It turns out that an expanding economy wasn't such a bad thing after all, and that when one is talking about sacrifice, it is surprising how often the person speaking means that that sacrifice should be someone else's. It means you graduates are not necessarily facing the wide open acceptance of your brilliance. There is no want ad that says, please, a Kennedy School graduate will pay $100,000 a year for the pleasure of 2 a.m. conversations over beer and pizza. Nor are there ads that say, state desperately needs Kennedy School alum to put us again on that path from which we have strayed. Not only that, but different people are beginning to compete for the same jobs, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult for everyone. When in fact we talk about the rigors of competition and how useful it is, again, there is a tendency to talk about how useful it is for someone else. But if you look around, that competition must, should, and ought be pushing others to examine the preparation you and this entire nation have received, and indeed, in particular for you, how you've received it. It does not mean or does not make your stay at the Kennedy School less valuable, but it may actually mean that the Kennedy School itself must look at the preparation it is giving to the men and women who seek to be part of public and private policy making in generations to come in America. One of those differences and one of the parts of competition that is changing rapidly is the makeup of the Kennedy School itself. In once a hallowed male bastion, is now entering a class 50% of whom are women. Does this mean that the women of the Kennedy School are less qualified than the males coming here? Does it mean that there has been some particularly odious form of affirmative action? I assure you that when the women write the huge texts required here for tuition, no one questions their abilities. In a school that wisely looks to provide for leadership for the future, it must also look at itself. It is simply not acceptable to have a school with the stature of the Kennedy School of Government talking about what to do about poverty, what to do about the issues of governance, what to do about the future of this place, this country, this planet, without tenured women, without a tenured African American, and even claim to responsibly and responsibly reflect the future of America and the world. There are those that say, give more time. That is an excuse heard too often. Only those who wish to make excuses can continue to use that stale alibi. But will it be difficult? Yes. Will it require change for Harvard? Yes. But if there is no change, the future will pass even this great institution by. It is also true when changes occur, other changes must follow. You do not educate huge groups of people, and that's what we've done for and with the women of America, here or in the rest of the world, and then tell them to stay out of the decision-making process. Just as you cannot have a school maintain its position if it cannot have the best, a nation cannot maintain its position without striving for excellence. To exclude any group is not appropriate, nor does it suit the needs of our nation, which must use the talents of all of our people. If we are to have a nation where merit truly counts, then merit cannot be based on old boy networks or tired formula. It must be based on excellence. And for men and women alike, there are therefore new challenges. It means using your skills, graduate, to make sure people aren't shunted aside, but are welcomed as part of America's continued quest for tomorrow. It won't always be comfortable. Pioneers, after all, do not always know the trails. They don't even know where they'll end. Researchers don't have the answers before they start their work. So in a world where many people say there are no frontiers left, there is nothing left to do, the graduates of the Kennedy School can make a real difference. Business, family, government, making them work counts. And with the education that you have received here, you can be part of that process. The age of exploration is not over. You will be part of new expeditions, not of outer space alone, but of society itself as we move forward. You, yes, you can be part of the first group of real leaders that end the politics of blame and start the policies of opportunity. For women, it means examining choices and taking responsibility for risking failure. It means for women not blaming others when the choices are difficult. It means not having all of the answers at the start and still moving forward. For men, It should not mean and need not mean stepping aside or even moving back. It means walking forward with now partners instead of dependents, and it means men and women working together in shared causes, shared commitments, and a shared desire for a better life, not just for them, but for the young men and the young women in generations to come. After being here at the Kennedy School, I believe you can do it. 100 years ago, when I graduated from college, I knew what my life would be. After all, I had an English major. I specialized, having a very practical mind, in the 18th century. So I knew I would marry and have children. Little did I know that my work in the 18th century would have so well prepared me for the mindset of the Congress of the United States. I did not fight what my life was meant to be. To marry, to have children, seemed and still seems to me a wonderful part of one's life, a part that one wishes for others. But as a woman of that generation, I looked for no more. The fact I had been a student senator, did I think I could be a United States senator? Of course not. Did I, Joan of Arc-like, fight against the fires of the stake? Of course not. I married a week after I graduated. I had a child 9 months and 2 weeks, counted. We used to then, after I graduated. And saw ahead of me, without recognizing it, a huge blank. A blank that I assumed would never fill. You today face no such blanks, but the same education, the same reading, the same skills have to prepare you for an even more extraordinary change than has happened in my life. You may not have blanks, but you still cannot know the future. The difference, I believe now, is that you are set. That's what the Kennedy School has done for you. You are ready. And that means you're ready for change. And now you can go to seek a new prize, a better prize, the prize that indeed will be this, a better future for you, for me, and for us all. Godspeed to you. Thank you very much.
Let's see, Secretary Martin has agreed to take some questions, so we've got a couple of microphones here. It would make things easier for people to hear if they would go to the microphone and maybe just identify themselves. There are also a couple of up there. How can this be such a bashful? I cannot believe at the Kennedy School.
I have to make one comment about what the dean said. I must say that, and that is that is an accurate story about my boyfriend, who is blonde and blue-eyed. But I must also tell you, Dean, on the way home, walking from school in 8th grade, when I was congratulating him, as my mother had taught me to do, we were very polite, and I found out, as I congratulated him, about this difference in voting pattern, the first gender gap in reverse. that I did learn a great lesson. It did, however, ruin what had been a sterling relationship. So there is risk in all of these things that one does.
Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Joe Carvin. I'm in the mid-career program here at the Kennedy School. And in terms of listening to your speech and to myself personally as a white male, you mentioned that males don't need to step aside or need to even take a step back. And I'm just wondering what suggestions do you have for white males in today's day?
From my vast experience of being a white male, Joe, let me tell you, they used to always ask me, in fact, when I started in politics, how does it feel to be a woman in politics? I never knew how to answer that either, since I'd been one most of my life. What was it compared to what? I mean, but you're asking, and it seems to me you're showing some courage and saying, wait a minute here, is my time over? My husband is pleased to note that I do believe, although I've occasionally hinted that one sex may be more juvenile and more emotional, that men should have equal rights. So in that, you're safe. I think it important to note that for white males, that it is absolutely foolish for women and minorities to expect them to be overjoyed at every moment with the changes going on. When there are 13 people after a job, and suddenly there are 23 people, why should you welcome any competitors? That doesn't make people racist or sexist to resent having had a better deal in some ways. The overall question has to be, are you going to be better off, you as a white male and others? The answer is, if we aren't able to use the talents of over half of our population, if we aren't able to have the abilities and skills of the minorities in our population, we will all be less better off. So there's an advantage. But the truth in what I was saying today is something that is very hard for bright young people to understand. This is not a television show with an ending in 30 minutes. We don't have all the answers yet. That's what you get to do. How do you combine, women tend to ask me, home and family? Not well some of the time. It isn't perfect. How are you going to have everything you want from life, be fair to women, be sensitive, be Alan Alda and John Wayne somehow, which is, it seems to me, what people often feel when you just want to be you? And the answer is, sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. The difference is, if we all do this right, and that's you more than even me, who's aging, you're going to be making some of these rules. You're going to be able to experiment if you're willing to change. In other words, if you're willing to say this part of the relationships, this part isn't working, we'll try this. Women tried to be just like men. I shouldn't stereotype, but I don't know if you remember women wearing sort of kind of gray suits with Bowie things here. It was an extraordinarily attractive look that even the thrift shops cannot get rid of, okay, It's a little like Nehru jackets for men. Their time had never come, and they stayed around a long time. I think women are beginning to get used to the idea of not being men, and men are getting used to the idea of not having to be women. That the strengths of each other as sexes can be complementary, and as individuals are going to be as different as each individual in this room. That there are going to be some women who want to be and ought to be president of the United States, and some that want to stay home. There are going to be some men who want to make their life in a wilderness, and others who want to be in the city. There are differences, and that growing respect will help. But it isn't there yet.
Thank you very much.
It isn't there yet. You're going to help make it. You're going to make it happen. And the last bit of advice is the one your mother gave you when you were 4. Because your mother is always right. There are certain things that are true. And that is, in general, when in doubt, treat someone else the way you want to be treated. Tends to be pretty good advice. Yes. With the exception of the dean. He's paid to take flack, but with that exception.
My name's Susan Hamill. I'm an MPP2 here at the Kennedy School. I'm wondering what your plans are for the future since the gentleman you worked for lost the last election.
Yes.
And I'm wondering in particular what your plans are for 1996.
Yes. I don't know if you noticed, it's very, and I'm not joking, the 80s, the same time, or the early 80s and 70s, when we were wearing those same suits so that we looked just like guys, but worse. You could never admit things. I mean, you as a woman, you weren't allowed. And I resented. I kept saying, I am the congressman, or I'm the representative. Now, it doesn't say W by my name. It says, R from Illinois. Nonetheless, there are some things that are true. It's very difficult for me, for instance, to accept applause. I find it really hard because growing up, there was a difference in how women and men were taught. So I hope you understand this. Unlike many males in America, I never wrote down what I wanted to be. The yearbooks, I want to be president, I want to be senator, I want to, run general. Hey, I want to go out Saturday night, some of the time is what I was thinking, I'm not trying to disparage me, I'm saying that's life. That's been wonderful in a way. Men sometimes are so overwhelmed by both their ambition and the need to achieve what they've set out to do. So I don't have an idea in the world. I didn't know I was ever going to be in the cabinet of the President of the United States. I still am awed by the fact I had that opportunity. And you hope you did some good. I mean, that's the only reason to do a job, to do some good, to be able to make a change, to make a difference. But I am concerned that in general, women's names are seldom mentioned for higher office. Part of that, let's not kid ourselves, is because they haven't had the experiences needed. I mean, I may know a real, very intelligent woman, but if she's had no political experience at all, any more than a man with none at all, would you say that person should be president or vice president? So you get that kind of the vicious circle that keeps on going. So yes, although I did not see it until it was faxed to me, I saw the articles about 1996, and part of me is enormously pleased. If you can understand, I don't think it's about me. It's about having women's names out there that would be rationally considered appropriate because of abilities and experience. And I want to see that happen. But I am trying to move into an apartment in 1993 and barely getting through that. So I'm gonna leave it at that for now. Yes.
I guess my question is similar.
Super dress, by the way.
Thank you. So is yours.
We can say things. See, it's okay to say. Your suit? Let's take a look. I mean,
See, with women
above average, but not a real strong, Certainly no big message to it, Dean,
See, with women on the faculty, we'd have a much broader spectrum of fashion sense as well.
That's kind of frightening. Are these usually this jolly, or are we supposed to be real serious? If we are, I'll start.
My question is similar to Susan's because the rumors also indicate that there's a possibility of your name or perhaps another woman being included as a vice presidential candidate. Could you comment on the likelihood of, if you don't want to comment on your possibility, then the likelihood of a woman and the likelihood of a pro-choice candidate?
Yes, again, recognizing that I have no crystal ball. And if I did, I might be Cassandra-like rather than and for my own party, I'd just as soon not be a Cassandra. Plus, she was on the losing side. Now that I think about it more and more, that would be a very bad analogy. I suppose that it's going to be a vice president first. I mean, you know, just common sense would indicate that. But don't sell women so short. If and I'll talk about my former boss for a moment. I mean, he was not in office, and he ran for the president. He had skills and abilities. So the idea that one would have to somehow already be, I think there are women, I think the Elizabeth Doles of this world, I think the Carla Hills of this world. I was very disappointed, just so you know, with now President Clinton, when in the final list there were no women for vice president. Because I thought, I may not, again, I don't always agree with these people, but certainly Congresswoman Schroeder, Senator Mikulski are, geez, they're dynamite campaigners and would have been an asset, it seems to me, to the ticket. Having said that, I think there will be women. I'm an old-fashioned conservative. I think government should stay out. And I believe that as truly for areas that affect women's lives as I do for men's lives. Can a pro-choice Republican woman be on the ticket? My answer is yes. Will she be? I don't know. Not if the only people that vote don't agree. I mean, it is a democracy here. I mean, that's something that people also have a tendency to forget. Sort of, how did you let those people win? Guess what? You get to vote here. Democracy doesn't guarantee the best. It doesn't guarantee your favorite. It just guarantees you the chance to be part of the picking process. And so if people stay at home, or if people with any particular point of view sort of just carpet each other instead of getting to work, then it won't happen. But otherwise, as a Republican, I never understood fully, I'd rather be right than be president. I thought you should be able to be both. And I still do. I still do. Yes?
Hi, yes. My name is Julie.
It's really nice, I will add this. Do you want to see a difference? 20 years ago, not one woman, if there had been a few in the room, would have asked a question, too. That's nice. The guy's been the bravest so far.
Well, there you go.
But the women are doing fine.
Okay, hi. You speak about the closing gap between men and women in the job market, and the increasingly competitive market, in fact, has effectively shut out men and women who have not been afforded some of the opportunities that my classmates and I have had. And my question to you is, what specific advice could you give us as future policymakers to ensure equal access to opportunities of other racial and socioeconomic groups?
Goodwill and merit and doing the right thing are never not going to be important. But they aren't enough in a world, especially in a free enterprise society. Now, you have to learn to accept a few things. The free enterprise society and the free market is not perfect. Business's first goal is not an individual's happiness. That's not their function. So it is quite clear that to get people into the mix, there are certain things that are going to have to happen, or you can't say we're going to somehow make it happen because we're going to, be these policymakers that will say, oh boy, we'll have everything for everybody. One, you better have a growing economy. You are not going to knock every white male out of a job. I mean, some of them are in this room and are generally related to some of us, and we're fond of them. So realistically, the way to have everyone moving together is to have more openings. The hardest thing for women to understand still is a dependency on government is another kind of dependency, and turns out in many ways to be self-defeating. We have got to have an expanding economy. Secondly, and this is where I hope you do have some answers. My grandfather, and I say grandfather, not grandmother, my grandfather could work at the stockyards with a 7th grade education and buy a house and a car. That isn't going to happen now. No matter how much you may wish it, it isn't going to happen now. So perhaps the single biggest problem facing our society, as a society, is not men versus women, black versus white, Anglo versus Hispanic, because we're all in this one together, is making sure we can move education faster, more quickly into more people's lives. Because the young woman who is unmarried, pregnant, and has dropped out of high school is going to be poor all of her life, no matter what policy you initiate. The young man who believes there is no future and starts running at 13 is not going to have a positive job experience by the time he's 30. So the real answer may not be in Washington. The goal, it seems to me, of everyone I've ever met at Kennedy School, having been there, believe me, the rest of the country's terrific. It may be at second and third grade throughout America.
I want to ask you a question that I think would be of interest to you. This is a group of people committed to public service. Think back in terms of this country, starting with Jimmy Carter. This is actually a nonpartisan statement, you'll be pleased to know. Sort of ran against government, certainly against Washington. Ronald Reagan ran against government, denigrated public service. George Bush did a good bit to try to turn it around, I think. Clinton certainly in the campaign all the more strongly trying to turn it around and move it further for a greater respect for public service. Where do you think it's headed?
One of the first dinners that they have here, I can't remember who the person was, so it isn't. Someone turned to me and said that there was someone from the Kennedy School that was going to be going to Washington to work in the Clinton administration. And I offered, congratulations. No, I did. I was really nice. It was just like 8th grade. Ah, congratulations. But then the person said something that just literally did take my breath away. And that person said, that guy said, isn't it incredible? He's going to take everything from the Kennedy School and go to the real world of Washington, D.C. It's the only place I've ever been that described Washington as the real world. So the Congress had some of the best, hardest working, nicest people. But anybody under siege they start the wagons circling. Members of Congress, in some ways, are, when I say working too hard, they've made it too complex. They're unwilling to change the process. I, for instance, believe that one of the major problems, this is no rocket scientist on this one, it is drugs. I mean, it's destroying parts of America. Our children are being lost to it. There are 53 committees and subcommittees in the Congress of the United States that work on drugs. Wouldn't you think that you would say, this is such a big problem that we're going to have one committee? I mean, we're going to change just the way we do things. We're going to work on it for 5 years. You're not going to be on any other committee. Every 4 months, we're going to go to the people, tell them what we thought, tell them what we're going to do. We'll listen to people, but at some point, we're going to say, we're going to do this. They don't like us, they're going to throw us out. I think Americans would say, yes, yes. President Clinton has underestimated what Americans are willing to do across party lines. We all know it's gotten sloppy. I don't care if you're, we just lost because people thought it was getting sloppy. It isn't that I can stand up here and say, and you know what I did for you. Come on, I said, change. Now, if American people are willing to do that, I think that the politics itself has to change. I think Ross Perot, whom in the beginning I resented greatly, was pushing a message that should be listened to, that people were willing to listen to some complex issues. They're willing to have you disagree with Ross Perot. They just want to be on a path to move. I think it's time actually to help the president do that too. I mean, by 1996, of course I want him to lose. I'm a Republican. Not now. Now I want him to win. For the next few years, we need and ought and have to do that. So the reason, it's back-ass words here, Dean. You don't have public service get better by just saying it's better. You make sure it's doing better public service. You make sure it puts the customer, the people first. You make sure when it's a problem, you try and solve it. And you don't tell the people they don't understand. Because the people are pretty sure they understand some things. And they think it should be better. I think they respect a lot of people in public service. Remember when everybody said the military was a pile of junk? Hey, look at the Persian Gulf. People even say, thank you did a terrific job. Same thing can be true about public service. So I don't know that I'd ever run against government, but I don't think you should run for the status quo. And that's what I think Americans know there's change out there and we have to do it. I think they're more willing than their leaders right now to change. An amazing country. An amazing country. Can I say thank you? I just want to say thank you. This is an unemployment agency for the disenfranchised by the voter. And they keep, when you come here, they keep telling you how it's what's the word? Somebody remind me of the word. It's one of those California words. Yeah, not laid back, but sort of like that's what you're going to do while you're here. You're going to mellow out all that routine. I didn't see any of that happening, but I will say that it is an extraordinary experience. Just as I didn't know I was ever going to be in the cabinet, I didn't know I was going to be at Harvard. Your children, your friends, the individuals of this class may not have known, but they got here too. About a number of years ago, about this time, I was in Peoria, Illinois, with friends who had a Down syndrome daughter. Her name was Jennifer. And Jennifer was 4 months old and had been diagnosed, but Jennifer was never going to be able to accomplish, was the word much. Anyway, Jennifer's mom and dad had a difficult time initially facing this. They were brilliant people. He'd gone to the London School of Economics. She was a teacher. They had a beautiful, wonderful boy, Jeffrey. And they had, instead of the usual, the pinks and blues and yellows that were very typical of the time for babies' rooms, this is when they were starting to bring in the strong colors that we now see today, but that was the idea was you stimulate. Anyway, I was watching Jennifer in a little sun porch while mom and dad got to be out with their other child because they hadn't had a lot of time for this. And while they were out on the swing set with Jeffrey, Jennifer turned over. It was incredible. I mean, she turned over. So I just screamed. Jennifer turned over. They came running in and said, she can't. We're wrong. She can't turn over. The doctor said she can't turn over. And so Jennifer turned over again. And we all cried. And I thought to myself then that this beautiful baby girl, who was never going to come to Harvard, had taught us all something that day. And maybe that's what graduations are about. That there isn't anything ever that for sure can't be done. If you can trust in the human spirit and the desire to go on that I hope was enhanced by your time at Harvard. I know it was for me. Thank you very much.
Well, I said something in the introduction about the recognition of people in Illinois and throughout the country of Lynn Martin's ability to lead and to inspire. I think we've all had a sense of that today. I hope you will join us all for a reception right here, and I hope that you are as inspired here, and I know you're all going to turn over. Thank you all.